The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before the Navy SEAL training compound at Coronado Beach. Salt spray filled the air as waves crashed against the shore where dozens of trainees struggled through their morning physical training. Among them, Jake Mitchell pushed himself harder than most, his muscles burning as he completed another set of push-ups on the wet sand. Jake had dreamed of becoming a SEAL since he was 12 years old. Growing up in a small farming town in Iowa, he had watched documentaries about special operations forces and knew that was his calling. His father, a Vietnam veteran, had warned him about the brutal training ahead, but Jake was determined. He had spent 2 years preparing his body and mind for this moment. The training was even more challenging than Jake had imagined. Every day brought new tests of physical and mental endurance. The instructors seemed to find creative ways to push the trainees beyond their limits. Sleep deprivation, freezing water, endless running, and constant pressure were just part of daily life. Many trainees had already dropped out, ringing the brass bell that signaled their withdrawal from the program. Captain Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez watched from a distance as the trainees completed their morning routine. At 38 years old, Tank was a legend among the SEAL community. He had completed 6 combat deployments and earned numerous medals for valor. His reputation preceded him wherever he went. Tank had been assigned to observe this particular class of trainees because the Navy was looking for exceptional candidates for a classified mission. Tank noticed Jake immediately. The young man from Iowa had a quiet intensity that set him apart from the others. While some trainees were vocal about their struggles, Jake simply put his head down and pushed forward. Tank had seen many types of warriors during his career, and he recognized something special in Jake's approach to training. The morning physical training session ended, and the trainees moved to the classroom for tactical instruction. Jake sat in the front row, taking detailed notes as the instructor explained advanced combat techniques. His notebook was filled with diagrams and observations from previous lessons. Unlike some trainees who seemed overwhelmed by the complexity of SEAL operations, Jake absorbed every detail. During the lunch break, Jake sat alone reviewing his notes. He preferred to use his free time for study rather than socializing. Some of the other trainees thought he was antisocial, but Jake knew that every minute of preparation could make the difference between success and failure in real combat situations. The afternoon brought water training in the Pacific Ocean. The instructors had the trainees practice underwater navigation and breath-holding exercises. The water was cold enough to numb exposed skin within minutes. Jake had always been a strong swimmer, but the SEAL water training was unlike anything he had experienced in Iowa's lakes and rivers. As Jake surfaced after a particularly challenging underwater exercise, he noticed Captain Rodriguez standing at the edge of the training area. The captain was watching the trainees with the focused attention of a predator studying potential prey. Jake had heard stories about Tank from other instructors, and he felt both honored and nervous to be under such scrutiny. The day's final exercise was a timed obstacle course that tested everything from climbing skills to problem-solving ability. Jake approached each obstacle methodically, using techniques he had practiced countless times. His farming background had given him practical strength and problem-solving skills that translated well to military training. As Jake completed the course, he heard one of the senior instructors make a comment to his colleague about Jake's performance. The words were encouraging, but Jake knew better than to let praise go to his head. SEAL training was designed to break down overconfident trainees just as effectively as it eliminated those who lacked determination. That evening, Jake sat in his bunk writing a letter to his parents. He tried to describe the intensity of the training without worrying them too much. His mother had been reluctant to support his military ambitions, but she understood that this was Jake's chosen path. His father had offered simple advice: work harder than everyone else and never quit. The barracks were unusually quiet that night. Several trainees had dropped out earlier in the day, and their empty bunks served as silent reminders of how difficult the program was. Jake used the extra space to spread out his tactical manuals and study materials. He wanted to be prepared for whatever challenges tomorrow would bring. Around midnight, Jake was startled by the sound of boots on the barracks floor. He looked up to see Captain Rodriguez walking slowly between the bunks, observing which trainees were still awake and what they were doing with their time. When Tank reached Jake's bunk, he paused for a moment to look at the study materials spread across the blanket. Tank didn't say anything, but Jake felt the weight of the captain's evaluation. This was clearly some kind of test, though Jake wasn't sure what the right response should be. He decided to continue studying while acknowledging the captain's presence with a respectful nod. After Tank left the barracks, Jake tried to analyze what had just happened. The captain's visit was obviously intentional, but its purpose remained unclear. Jake had learned that everything in SEAL training had a purpose, even when that purpose wasn't immediately obvious to the trainees. The next morning brought news that would change everything for Jake's training class. During the morning formation, the lead instructor announced that a senior SEAL officer would be joining their training exercises for an extended evaluation period. The trainees would be tested not just on their individual skills, but on their ability to work effectively under the observation of an experienced combat veteran. Jake felt his stomach tighten with nervous energy. He had worked hard to blend in with his class while excelling in his individual performance. Now he would be under even greater scrutiny from someone who had seen real combat. The pressure was mounting, but Jake tried to channel his nervousness into focused determination. The morning's first exercise was a team-based navigation challenge in the nearby mountains. The trainees were divided into small groups and given coordinates to reach within a specific time limit. Jake found himself assigned to a team with 3 other trainees, including Marcus Webb, a former college football player who had struggled with some of the more technical aspects of training. As the teams prepared to depart, Jake noticed Captain Rodriguez in full combat gear, ready to observe the exercise firsthand. The captain would be following the teams through the mountain terrain, evaluating their performance under realistic conditions. Jake realized this was more than just another training exercise. The navigation challenge began before dawn, with teams setting out in different directions toward their assigned coordinates. Jake's team moved steadily through the rough terrain, using compass and map reading skills that Jake had mastered during his pre-training preparation. The mountains of California were different from the flat farmland of Iowa, but the basic principles of land navigation remained the same. About 2 hours into the exercise, Jake's team encountered their first major obstacle. A steep ravine blocked their direct route to the coordinates, forcing them to choose between a time-consuming detour or a risky direct descent. Marcus wanted to take the safer route, but the time constraint made that option problematic. Jake studied the ravine carefully, looking for a path that would allow safe passage without excessive delay. His farming background had taught him to evaluate terrain for practical purposes, and he identified a series of rock formations that could serve as a climbing route. The path would be challenging but manageable for properly trained individuals. As Jake explained his proposed route to the team, he noticed movement in the tree line above them. Captain Rodriguez was observing their decision-making process, though he remained far enough away to avoid influencing their choices. Jake felt the additional pressure but tried to focus on the tactical problem at hand. The team decided to follow Jake's suggested route down the ravine. The descent required careful coordination and mutual support, with team members helping each other navigate the most difficult sections. Jake found himself naturally taking a leadership role, providing guidance and encouragement to his teammates. Marcus struggled with one particularly challenging section of the descent, his larger frame making it difficult to navigate between 2 close rock formations. Jake quickly repositioned himself to provide physical support, helping Marcus through the obstacle without compromising the team's overall progress. When the team reached the bottom of the ravine, they had successfully maintained their timeline while navigating a significant obstacle. Jake felt a sense of accomplishment, but he also knew the exercise was far from over. The return journey would present its own challenges, and Captain Rodriguez would be evaluating their performance throughout the entire mission. The team's radio crackled with an unexpected message from the training cadre. Their mission had been modified, and they now needed to reach an alternate set of coordinates before sunset. The change added complexity and time pressure to an already challenging exercise. Jake realized this was probably another test of their adaptability and problem-solving abilities. As the day progressed, Jake's team faced a series of unexpected challenges that seemed designed to test their resilience and teamwork. Equipment failures, changing weather conditions, and modified objectives kept them constantly adapting their plans. Through it all, Jake maintained his focus on mission completion while supporting his teammates. The sun was beginning to set when Jake's team finally reached their modified objective coordinates. They were exhausted but had successfully completed all assigned tasks within the required timeframe. As they prepared for extraction, Jake noticed Captain Rodriguez approaching their position with what might have been approval in his expression. That night, back at the training compound, Jake reflected on the day's events. The exercise had pushed his team beyond their comfort zones and tested skills they had been developing throughout their training. More importantly, it had given him a chance to demonstrate leadership abilities under the observation of an experienced SEAL officer. The next morning brought an announcement that would dramatically alter the trajectory of Jake's training experience. During formation, the lead instructor revealed that Captain Rodriguez had requested to work directly with selected trainees on advanced training scenarios. Jake's name was among those chosen for this special program. Jake felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension as he considered what this opportunity might mean. Working directly with a legendary SEAL officer could accelerate his development as a warrior, but it also meant facing even greater challenges and expectations. He thought about his father's advice to work harder than everyone else and resolved to meet whatever tests lay ahead. Captain Rodriguez stood before the small group of selected trainees in a specialized training facility that most SEAL candidates never saw. The room contained advanced simulation equipment, tactical displays, and weapons systems that represented the cutting edge of military technology. Jake felt privileged to be included in this elite group, but he also understood that greater opportunities meant greater risks. The captain's voice carried the authority of someone who had faced life-and-death situations countless times. He explained that the selected trainees would participate in advanced scenarios designed to identify future leaders within the SEAL community. These exercises would simulate real-world missions with unprecedented realism and complexity. Jake listened carefully as Captain Rodriguez outlined the training philosophy that would guide their advanced program. Unlike the standardized training that all SEAL candidates received, this specialized instruction would adapt to each trainee's strengths and weaknesses. The goal was not just to create competent operators, but to identify and develop exceptional warriors who could handle the most challenging missions. The first advanced scenario took place in a mock urban environment that had been constructed to simulate Middle Eastern cities where SEALs frequently operated. The facility included realistic buildings, civilian role-players, and sophisticated surveillance systems. Jake had never trained in such a complex and realistic environment. Captain Rodriguez divided the selected trainees into two-man teams for the first exercise. Jake found himself paired with Tony Chen, a former Marine who had joined the Navy specifically to become a SEAL. Tony was methodical and technically proficient, making him an ideal partner for the complex scenarios they would face. The mission briefing revealed that their team would need to infiltrate a terrorist safe house, gather intelligence, and extract without alerting enemy forces in the surrounding area. The scenario included multiple variables and potential complications that would test their adaptability and decision-making skills under pressure. As Jake and Tony prepared their equipment, Captain Rodriguez approached their position. The captain's presence added an additional layer of pressure to an already challenging exercise. Jake had learned that Tank rarely offered direct guidance during training scenarios, preferring to evaluate how trainees handled problems independently. The urban infiltration began at sunset, when darkness would provide concealment for their approach to the target building. Jake and Tony moved carefully through the mock city streets, using shadows and architectural features to avoid detection by enemy sentries. Their movement was deliberate and coordinated, reflecting hours of practice in stealth techniques. The target building presented multiple entry options, each with distinct advantages and risks. Jake studied the structure while Tony monitored their surroundings for potential threats. They had to balance speed with security, knowing that a rushed decision could compromise their mission or safety. Jake identified a second-story window that appeared to offer the best combination of concealment and access to their intelligence objective. The approach would require climbing skills and precise timing, but it would avoid the more heavily guarded ground-level entrances. Tony agreed with Jake's assessment, and they began implementing their infiltration plan. The climb to the second-story window tested Jake's physical conditioning and technical skills. He used specialized equipment to scale the building's exterior while maintaining silence and avoiding detection. Tony provided security and communication support from ground level, ready to alert Jake of any approaching threats. Once inside the building, Jake found himself in a realistic recreation of a terrorist safe house. The rooms contained documents, computers, and communication equipment that he needed to photograph and analyze. The intelligence gathering had to be completed quickly and thoroughly, as extended time and the target location increased the risk of discovery. As Jake worked through the intelligence collection process, his radio earpiece crackled with an urgent message from Tony. Enemy patrols were approaching the building, and their extraction window was closing rapidly. Jake had to make a critical decision about whether to complete his intelligence mission or prioritize immediate escape. Jake chose to continue the intelligence gathering for another 60 seconds, believing that the information he was collecting justified the additional risk. He photographed the remaining documents and downloaded files from a computer system before beginning his exit from the building. The decision required precise timing and complete confidence in his abilities. The extraction route took Jake through areas of the building he had not previously explored. He moved carefully but quickly, using his tactical training to navigate potential ambush points and danger areas. Tony's voice in his earpiece provided critical updates about enemy patrol movements and safe corridors for escape. Jake successfully exited the building and rejoined Tony at their predetermined rally point. They had completed their intelligence mission and avoided detection by enemy forces throughout the exercise. As they prepared to move to their extraction location, Captain Rodriguez emerged from the shadows where he had been observing their performance. The captain's expression was unreadable as he evaluated their mission execution. Jake felt the weight of Tank's assessment, knowing that this evaluation could significantly impact his future in the SEAL program. Tony stood quietly beside him, equally aware of the importance of this moment. Captain Rodriguez began his assessment by acknowledging the successful completion of their primary objectives. Jake and Tony had demonstrated technical competence, tactical judgment, and effective teamwork throughout the scenario. However, the captain also identified areas where their performance could be improved. The critique session that followed was unlike anything Jake had experienced during his standard SEAL training. Captain Rodriguez provided detailed analysis of their decision-making process, tactical choices, and execution techniques. The feedback was specific, constructive, and clearly based on extensive real-world experience. Jake learned that his decision to extend the intelligence gathering phase had been tactically sound but operationally risky. Captain Rodriguez explained how similar decisions in actual combat situations had sometimes led to casualties or mission failure. The lesson was valuable but sobering. Over the following days, Jake and the other selected trainees participated in increasingly complex scenarios that challenged every aspect of their training. Maritime infiltration exercises, hostage rescue simulations, and counter-terrorism operations pushed them beyond the standard SEAL curriculum into specialized areas of expertise. Each scenario was followed by detailed evaluation sessions with Captain Rodriguez. Jake found these critiques to be among the most valuable learning experiences of his entire military career. Tank's ability to identify subtle tactical errors and suggest improvements was extraordinary, reflecting years of operational experience at the highest levels. The relationship between Jake and Captain Rodriguez began to evolve as the advanced training progressed. While Tank maintained his role as an instructor and evaluator, he also began to share insights about SEAL operations that went beyond basic tactical techniques. These conversations provided Jake with a deeper understanding of what it meant to be a special operations warrior. During one evening discussion, Captain Rodriguez shared stories from his own early career as a SEAL. Jake learned that even legendary operators like Tank had faced moments of doubt and failure during their development. The captain's willingness to share these experiences created a more personal connection that enhanced Jake's learning process. The advanced training program included psychological evaluations that were far more sophisticated than anything in the standard SEAL curriculum. Jake participated in stress interviews, personality assessments, and scenario-based psychological tests designed to evaluate his suitability for the most challenging special operations missions. Dr. Sarah Matthews, the program's psychological consultant, conducted extensive interviews with each trainee. Her questions probed Jake's motivations, fears, and decision-making processes under various forms of stress. Jake found these sessions challenging but ultimately valuable for understanding his own psychological strengths and limitations. The psychological evaluation revealed that Jake possessed unusual emotional stability and stress tolerance, qualities that were highly valued in special operations personnel. Dr. Matthews noted that Jake's rural background and strong family relationships had provided him with psychological resilience that many urban candidates lacked. Captain Rodriguez reviewed Jake's psychological profile with obvious interest. The combination of tactical competence, physical conditioning, and psychological stability made Jake a candidate for the most elite SEAL missions. Tank began to modify Jake's training program to include elements that would prepare him for classified operations. The specialized training included exposure to advanced weapons systems, exotic insertion techniques, and classified tactical procedures that were not part of standard SEAL training. Jake realized that he was being prepared for missions that most SEALs would never see, operations that required exceptional skill and absolute reliability. As the advanced program neared its conclusion, Captain Rodriguez presented Jake with an opportunity that would define the next phase of his military career. A classified unit was forming to handle the most sensitive special operations missions, and Jake had been identified as a potential candidate for selection. The opportunity represented everything Jake had dreamed of when he first decided to become a SEAL. However, Tank made it clear that acceptance would require commitments and sacrifices that went far beyond standard military service. The classified nature of the unit's missions would limit Jake's ability to maintain normal relationships and pursue conventional career paths. Jake requested time to consider the offer, understanding that this decision would fundamentally alter the trajectory of his life. He thought about his parents in Iowa, his girlfriend back home, and the normal life he would be giving up in pursuit of this extraordinary opportunity. That night, Jake sat alone in his quarters reflecting on everything he had learned during the advanced training program. Captain Rodriguez had shown him what it meant to be an elite warrior, but the path forward required sacrifices that Jake was still processing. The decision would test not just his tactical abilities, but his understanding of what truly mattered in his life. The final exercise of the advanced program would be the most challenging yet. Captain Rodriguez announced that each trainee would face a solo scenario designed to test their individual capabilities without team support. Jake would have to demonstrate that he could operate independently at the highest levels of special operations. As Jake prepared for his final evaluation, he reflected on how much he had changed since arriving at SEAL training. The young man from Iowa who had dreamed of becoming a special operations warrior was evolving into something more sophisticated and dangerous. Captain Rodriguez had helped him discover capabilities he never knew he possessed. The transformation was both exhilarating and sobering. Jake understood that with greater capability came greater responsibility, and the missions he might face would require him to make decisions that could affect national security and human lives. The weight of that responsibility was something he was still learning to carry. The advanced training had shown Jake what was possible when human potential was developed to its absolute limits. Captain Rodriguez represented the pinnacle of what a SEAL could become, and Jake was beginning to understand what it would take to reach that level of excellence. The journey ahead would test everything he had learned and everything he believed about himself. The morning of Jake's final solo evaluation arrived with an unusual tension in the air. Captain Rodriguez had designed this scenario personally, drawing on his most challenging combat experiences to create a test that would reveal Jake's true potential as a special operations warrior. Unlike previous exercises, this evaluation would have no backup support or safety measures beyond basic medical monitoring. Jake stood alone in the briefing room as Captain Rodriguez explained the scenario parameters. A simulated terrorist cell had taken hostages in a remote compound, and intelligence suggested they were planning to execute the captives within 12 hours. Jake would have to plan and execute a solo rescue operation using only standard SEAL equipment and his own tactical judgment. The compound layout was based on an actual terrorist facility that Tank had assaulted during his 4th deployment in Afghanistan. Every detail had been recreated with precision, from the defensive positions to the civilian role players who would portray the hostages. Jake would face the same tactical challenges that had tested Captain Rodriguez and his team in actual combat. As Jake studied the intelligence briefing materials, he realized that this scenario was far more complex than anything he had faced during his training. Multiple enemy combatants, unknown hostage locations, limited entry points, and time pressure created a tactical puzzle that would challenge even experienced operators. Captain Rodriguez was testing whether Jake could think and operate like a seasoned SEAL. The planning phase gave Jake 6 hours to develop his approach to the rescue operation. He studied satellite imagery, guard rotation patterns, and facility blueprints while considering various infiltration and assault options. Every decision had to account for hostage safety while maximizing his chances of neutralizing the terrorist threat. Jake's rural background proved valuable as he analyzed the terrain surrounding the target compound. The facility was located in a desert environment that reminded him of the Badlands near his Iowa home, though the tactical implications were quite different. He identified approach routes that would provide concealment while avoiding known enemy observation points. The weapons selection process required Jake to balance firepower with mobility and stealth requirements. He chose a suppressed assault rifle as his primary weapon, along with specialized demolitions equipment for breaching operations. Every piece of gear had to serve multiple purposes, as he would have no resupply opportunities during the mission. Captain Rodriguez observed Jake's planning process from a distance, taking notes on his decision-making methodology and tactical reasoning. Tank had seen many young operators attempt similar scenarios, and he was looking for specific indicators of advanced tactical thinking and operational maturity. As the planning phase concluded, Jake felt confident in his approach but understood that actual execution would present unforeseen challenges. Captain Rodriguez had emphasized that the scenario would include variables and complications that were not apparent in the initial briefing materials. Jake would have to adapt his plans based on real-time intelligence and changing tactical situations. The insertion phase began at sunset, with Jake approaching the target compound through 3 miles of rough desert terrain. He moved carefully but efficiently, using natural concealment and tactical movement techniques to avoid detection by enemy patrols. The physical demands of the approach tested his conditioning while requiring absolute mental focus. Jake's first surprise came when he discovered that the compound's defensive layout had been modified since his initial briefing. Additional guard posts and surveillance equipment had been installed, forcing him to revise his infiltration plan in real time. The change tested his ability to adapt quickly while maintaining operational security. The revised approach required Jake to neutralize a roving patrol that had not appeared in his original intelligence. He used specialized techniques to silently eliminate the threat without alerting other enemy forces. The action demonstrated his tactical competence but also highlighted the psychological demands of simulated combat operations. As Jake penetrated the compound's outer perimeter, he began gathering real-time intelligence about hostage locations and enemy force disposition. The information contradicted some of his planning assumptions, requiring further tactical adjustments. Captain Rodriguez was testing Jake's ability to remain flexible and effective when initial plans proved inadequate. The hostage rescue operation required Jake to clear multiple buildings while ensuring the safety of civilian role-players. Each room presented potential threats and tactical challenges that had to be resolved quickly and decisively. Jake's training took over as he moved through the compound with controlled aggression and tactical precision. During the assault phase, Jake encountered unexpected resistance from enemy role-players who had been instructed to test his combat skills and decision-making under pressure. The simulated firefights required him to use cover effectively while advancing toward his objectives. The physical and mental stress of sustained combat operations tested every aspect of his training. Jake successfully located and secured the hostages in a basement facility that matched the layout from Captain Rodriguez's actual Afghanistan deployment. The rescue required precise breaching techniques and careful coordination to ensure that no role-playing civilians were injured during the assault. Jake's execution was flawless, demonstrating master-level technical skills. The extraction phase presented Jake with his greatest challenge, as he had to move multiple hostages through hostile territory while maintaining security and tactical effectiveness. The scenario required leadership skills and tactical judgment that went beyond individual operator capabilities. Captain Rodriguez was evaluating Jake's potential for future command responsibilities. As Jake led the hostages toward their extraction point, he was confronted by a final tactical surprise that Captain Rodriguez had incorporated into the scenario. Enemy reinforcements arrived at the compound, requiring Jake to conduct a fighting withdrawal while protecting civilian roleplayers. The situation tested his ability to maintain tactical effectiveness under maximum stress. Jake's performance during the final phase exceeded Captain Rodriguez's expectations. He successfully protected all hostages while neutralizing enemy threats and reaching the extraction point within the assigned timeframe. His tactical decisions reflected the judgment of an experienced operator rather than a trainee still developing his skills. The debriefing session following Jake's solo evaluation was unlike any previous training critique. Captain Rodriguez's assessment was thorough and professional, but Jake detected an undertone of genuine respect that had not been present in earlier evaluations. Tank had seen something in Jake's performance that marked him as exceptional. Captain Rodriguez began by acknowledging that Jake's execution had been tactically sound throughout the scenario. More importantly, his adaptability and decision-making under pressure demonstrated the psychological characteristics of a natural leader. Tank explained that Jake possessed qualities that could not be taught, only developed through experience and proper guidance. The conversation shifted from evaluation to mentorship as Captain Rodriguez shared insights about what Jake's performance meant for his future in special operations. Tank revealed that Jake's psychological profile and tactical competence made him suitable for the most classified SEAL missions, operations that required absolute reliability and independence. Jake learned that fewer than 5% of SEAL candidates possessed the combination of skills and characteristics needed for Tier 1 special operations units. His performance during the advanced training program had identified him as belonging to this elite category. Captain Rodriguez was prepared to recommend Jake for immediate selection into the classified unit he had mentioned earlier. The opportunity came with significant personal costs that Captain Rodriguez explained in detail. Tier 1 operators faced extended deployments, dangerous missions, and limited contact with family and friends. The psychological demands of the most classified operations had ended many marriages and destroyed personal relationships. Jake requested time to consider the offer, but Captain Rodriguez explained that the window for acceptance was limited. The classified unit was forming immediately, and candidates who declined selection might not receive another opportunity for years. Jake would have to make his decision within 24 hours. That evening, Jake called his parents in Iowa to discuss the opportunity without revealing classified details about his training or the selection offer. His father listened carefully before offering simple advice: follow your instincts and commit completely to whatever path you choose. His mother's concerns were more practical, focusing on his safety and long-term happiness. Jake's girlfriend, Michelle, was more directly affected by his potential selection into a classified unit. Their relationship had already been strained by his extended absence during SEAL training. The requirements of Tier 1 operations would make normal relationship development virtually impossible. The conversation with Michelle was difficult but honest. Jake explained that his military career was moving in directions he had never imagined when he first decided to become a SEAL. She understood his passion for special operations but struggled with the implications for their future together. As Jake considered his decision, he reflected on the transformation he had undergone during his time with Captain Rodriguez. The young man from Iowa who had arrived at SEAL training had evolved into someone capable of operating at the highest levels of special warfare. The change was profound and irreversible. Jake realized that his decision was not just about career opportunities or personal relationships. Captain Rodriguez had shown him a level of excellence and purpose that transcended individual concerns. The missions he might face as a Tier 1 operator could affect national security and save lives in ways that most people would never know about. The next morning, Jake sought out Captain Rodriguez to discuss his decision privately. Tank listened as Jake explained his reasoning and concerns, offering guidance based on his own experiences with similar choices early in his career. The captain's advice was practical and honest about both the rewards and costs of elite special operations. Captain Rodriguez shared a story from his own selection into a classified unit 15 years earlier. The decision had cost him his first marriage but had led to the most meaningful and impactful work of his military career. Tank emphasized that there were no perfect choices, only decisions that aligned with an individual's deepest values and sense of purpose. Jake made his decision based on his understanding of what he had learned about himself during the advanced training program. The young farmer from Iowa had discovered capabilities and drive that could only be fulfilled through the most challenging special operations missions. Captain Rodriguez had helped him recognize his true potential. When Jake accepted selection into the classified unit, Captain Rodriguez's response was professional but clearly pleased. Tank explained that Jake would be departing for specialized training within 48 hours, beginning a new phase of his military career that would test everything he had learned and prepare him for missions beyond current imagination. The final conversation between Jake and Captain Rodriguez took place as Jake prepared for his departure to the classified training facility. Tank offered advice about maintaining psychological balance during extended operations and emphasized the importance of remembering the values that had brought Jake to this point in his career. Captain Rodriguez also shared his contact information with Jake, explaining that even elite operators needed mentors and advisors throughout their careers. Tank's offer of continued guidance represented more than professional courtesy, it reflected his genuine belief in Jake's potential to become one of the military's most effective special operations warriors. As Jake prepared to leave Coronado for his new assignment, he understood that his relationship with Captain Rodriguez had fundamentally changed his understanding of what it meant to be a warrior. Tank had shown him that elite military service was about more than individual achievement or personal glory. The most meaningful missions were those that served purposes larger than oneself. The training program had transformed Jake from an ambitious young man into a professional warrior capable of operating in the most demanding environments. Captain Rodriguez had guided this transformation with expertise and wisdom that could only come from years of experience at the highest levels of special operations. Jake's journey was far from over, but the foundation provided by his time with Captain Rodriguez would support him throughout whatever challenges lay ahead. Tank had given him not just technical skills and tactical knowledge, but the psychological framework needed to operate effectively in the shadows where the most critical missions take place. 3 years later, Lieutenant Jake Mitchell stood on the deck of a submarine somewhere in the Arabian Sea, preparing for a mission that would test everything Captain Rodriguez had taught him. The classified operation required infiltrating a terrorist facility to capture a high-value target who possessed intelligence about planned attacks on American cities. Jake was now a team leader in the most elite SEAL unit, responsible for men whose skills rivaled his own. The submarine's hull cut silently through dark waters as Jake reviewed mission parameters with his four-man team. Each operator had been selected for specific skills that complemented the overall mission requirements. Jake's role as team leader required him to coordinate their individual capabilities into a unified tactical effort that could adapt to changing circumstances. Petty Officer Carlos Reyes served as the team's communications specialist and Spanish linguist. His technical expertise with advanced communications equipment would be critical for maintaining contact with command during the mission. Carlos had joined the team 6 months earlier and had quickly proven his reliability under pressure. Chief Thompson handled heavy weapons and demolitions, bringing 15 years of SEAL experience to the team. His knowledge of explosive devices and defensive systems made him invaluable for missions requiring specialized technical skills. Thompson had worked with Jake on previous operations and understood his leadership style. Petty Officer David Kim functioned as the team's medic and intelligence analyst. His medical training provided emergency care capabilities, while his intelligence background helped with real-time assessment of tactical situations. Kim's analytical mind complemented Jake's intuitive decision-making process. The mission briefing revealed that their target was Rashid al-Mansouri, a former Iraqi intelligence officer who had helped coordinate terrorist operations across the Middle East. Al-Mansouri possessed detailed knowledge of planned attacks that could kill thousands of American civilians. His capture required precise execution and complete operational security. Jake's team would insert by small boat 15 miles from the target facility, then infiltrate overland to avoid coastal surveillance systems. The approach would take them through hostile territory where other terrorist groups maintained active patrols. Every aspect of the mission required careful timing and coordination. As the submarine approached the insertion point, Jake felt the familiar combination of nervousness and excitement that preceded dangerous operations. Captain Rodriguez had taught him to channel these emotions into focused tactical thinking. Tank's lessons about psychological preparation had become fundamental to Jake's approach to combat operations. The team's equipment reflected the latest advances in special operations technology. Night vision systems, communications gear, weapons, and surveillance equipment gave them capabilities that exceeded what had been available during Captain Rodriguez's early career. However, Jake understood that technology was only as effective as the warriors who used it. The small boat insertion proceeded smoothly through calm seas under a moonless sky that provided excellent concealment. Jake piloted the rigid inflatable boat toward shore while his team maintained security and monitored communications. The approach required precise navigation to reach their planned landing site without detection. The team reached the rocky coastline exactly on schedule, demonstrating the navigation skills that Jake had developed through years of training and operational experience. They quickly secured their boat and began the overland movement toward the target facility. The terrain was harsh and unfamiliar, requiring constant vigilance and tactical awareness. Jake's leadership during the infiltration phase reflected lessons learned from Captain Rodriguez about balancing mission requirements with team safety. He pushed the pace when necessary but also recognized when his men needed rest or tactical adjustments. The ability to read his team's condition and adapt accordingly had become one of Jake's most valuable skills. 2 hours into the overland movement, Jake's team encountered an unexpected patrol that forced them to deviate from their planned route. The enemy force consisted of 6 armed men who appeared to be conducting routine security sweeps rather than responding to specific intelligence. Jake had to decide whether to avoid contact or eliminate the threat. Jake chose to avoid the patrol, understanding that premature contact could compromise their primary mission. The team used advanced concealment techniques to remain undetected while the enemy force passed within 50 meters of their position. Captain Rodriguez had emphasized that the best special operations victories were often invisible to the enemy. The modified route added 30 minutes to their timeline but allowed them to reach the target facility without alerting enemy forces to their presence. Jake's decision demonstrated the tactical judgment that Captain Rodriguez had helped develop during his advanced training years earlier. Every choice had consequences that extended far beyond immediate circumstances. The target facility was a fortified compound containing multiple buildings and extensive security systems. Jake's team spent 40 minutes conducting surveillance to identify guard positions, entry points, and potential complications. The reconnaissance revealed that their intelligence was accurate but incomplete. Al-Mansuri was being held in the compound's main building, but additional security measures had been implemented since their last intelligence update. Jake had to modify his assault plan to account for changes in guard rotations and surveillance equipment. The ability to adapt plans based on real-time intelligence was critical for mission success. Jake's assault plan divided his team into 2 elements for maximum flexibility and firepower. Thompson and Kim would provide overwatch and security while Jake and Reyes conducted the actual capture operation. The approach balanced speed with precision, minimizing exposure while ensuring mission completion. The infiltration phase required Jake and Reyes to penetrate the compound's perimeter without alerting guards or triggering security systems. They used specialized equipment and techniques that represented years of technological development and tactical evolution. Every movement was calculated and precise. Jake felt the weight of responsibility as he led Reyes through the compound toward Al-Mansuri's location. Captain Rodriguez had taught him that leadership in combat required absolute confidence combined with constant readiness to adapt. Jake's team was depending on his judgment and tactical expertise for their survival and mission success. The target building presented multiple entry options, each with distinct tactical implications. Jake selected a second-story window approach that would provide surprise and minimize the risk of casualties among potential civilians in the building. The decision required advanced climbing skills and perfect coordination with Reyes. As Jake and Reyes reached Al-Mansuri's location, they discovered that their target was not alone. 3 other individuals were present in the room, creating complications that had not been anticipated in their mission planning. Jake had to make instant tactical decisions about how to proceed with the capture while protecting innocent lives. Jake quickly assessed the situation and determined that 2 of the additional individuals were bodyguards while the third appeared to be a civilian. The presence of armed security required immediate action to prevent Al-Mansuri from escaping or calling for help. Jake's combat training took over as he neutralized the threats with surgical precision. The capture of Al-Mansuri proceeded exactly as Jake had planned, with Reyes providing security while Jake secured their high-value target. The operation required speed and coordination that reflected thousands of hours of training and previous operational experience. Captain Rodriguez's lessons about remaining calm under pressure proved invaluable. The extraction phase presented Jake's team with their greatest challenge as they moved Al-Mansuri through hostile territory toward their extraction point. The prisoner required constant security while they navigated terrain that could conceal enemy ambushes. Jake's leadership skills were tested as he coordinated movement while maintaining tactical awareness. Enemy forces discovered the raid approximately 20 minutes after Jake's team departed the compound. Radio communications intercepted by Kim indicated that hostile patrols were being deployed to intercept their extraction. Jake had to modify his route and timeline to avoid contact while ensuring they reached the pickup point on schedule. The fighting withdrawal that followed tested every aspect of Jake's leadership and his team's tactical capabilities. Thompson's heavy weapons expertise proved critical as they engaged pursuing enemy forces while protecting their prisoner. Jake coordinated the team's defensive actions while maintaining forward movement toward safety. Jake's radio crackled with updates from the extraction helicopter as it approached their position. The pilot reported additional enemy activity in the area, requiring precise coordination to ensure a successful pickup. Jake's communications with the aircrew reflected the calm professionalism that Captain Rodriguez had modeled during Jake's training. The helicopter extraction proceeded under enemy fire, with Jake's team providing security while loading Al-Mansuri and their equipment. Thompson's covering fire suppressed enemy positions while Jake ensured that everyone reached safety. The operation concluded successfully, but Jake understood that their mission was only beginning. During the flight back to their forward operating base, Jake reflected on how his leadership had evolved since his training with Captain Rodriguez. Tank's lessons about tactical thinking and psychological preparation had become integrated into Jake's operational approach. Every decision reflected principles that Captain Rodriguez had taught him years earlier. The intelligence gathered from Al-Mansuri during subsequent interrogations led to the disruption of terrorist operations across 3 countries. Jake's team had prevented attacks that would have killed hundreds of innocent civilians. The mission's success validated everything Captain Rodriguez had taught about the importance of elite special operations capabilities. A month later, Jake received an unexpected message that Captain Rodriguez had been assigned to evaluate his unit's operational effectiveness. Tank was returning to active duty after a staff assignment, and Jake would have the opportunity to demonstrate how he had applied the lessons learned during his advanced training years earlier. The reunion between Jake and Captain Rodriguez took place in a secure briefing facility where Tank was reviewing operational reports from Jake's recent missions. The professional relationship had evolved, but Jake still felt the respect and admiration that had developed during his training under Tank's guidance. Captain Rodriguez's evaluation of Jake's leadership was thorough and professional, focusing on tactical decision-making, team management, and mission execution. Tank noted that Jake had developed into exactly the type of leader he had identified during the advanced training program. The young man from Iowa had fulfilled his potential as an elite warrior. The conversation between Jake and Tank extended beyond professional evaluation to discuss the psychological challenges of sustained special operations service. Captain Rodriguez shared insights about maintaining balance and perspective during extended combat deployments. Tank's guidance remained valuable even as Jake's own experience and responsibilities had grown. Jake learned that Captain Rodriguez was being considered for promotion to command a joint special operations task force. Tank's new role would involve coordinating elite units from different military services on the most sensitive national security missions. Jake felt honored that his former mentor trusted him enough to discuss these career developments. As their meeting concluded, Captain Rodriguez offered Jake an opportunity to join his new command as a senior team leader. The position would represent the pinnacle of special operations service, involving missions that could affect global security. Tank's offer reflected his continued confidence in Jake's abilities and potential. Jake's decision to accept Captain Rodriguez's offer was immediate and certain. The opportunity to serve under Tank's command again represented everything he had worked toward since beginning his SEAL training. Their partnership had been forged during Jake's development as a warrior and would continue as both men faced new challenges. The final conversation between Jake and Captain Rodriguez took place as they prepared for their new assignments. Tank emphasized that their professional relationship had evolved into a partnership between equals who shared common values and commitment to excellence. Jake had become the type of leader that Captain Rodriguez had envisioned during their first meeting years earlier. Jake understood that his journey from small-town Iowa farmer to elite special operations leader had been guided by Captain Rodriguez's mentorship and example. Tank had shown him what it meant to be a warrior in the truest sense, someone who served purposes larger than personal ambition or recognition. As Jake prepared for his new role in Captain Rodriguez's command, he reflected on the transformation that had begun during his SEAL training. The young man who had dreamed of becoming a special operations warrior had evolved into a leader capable of guiding other elite warriors through the most challenging missions imaginable. The relationship between Jake and Captain Rodriguez had transcended the traditional boundaries between instructor and student. They had become partners in service to their country and comrades in the brotherhood of warriors who operated in the shadows to protect American lives and interests around the world. Their story continued as both men faced new challenges and responsibilities, but the foundation of respect, trust, and shared commitment that had developed during Jake's training would support them throughout whatever missions lay ahead. Captain Rodriguez had created not just an elite operator, but a leader who would train and guide the next generation of special operations warriors.